Jin-woo stood in the laboratory, feeling the weight of existence settle into his restored body. Everything was familiar yet strange. He remembered being human, remembered Earth with its blue skies and green forests. But he also remembered 50 years of floating in quantum space, watching reality from the outside. "How many of us are left?" he asked the research team. Hayeri checked her instruments. Billions of consciousness fragments scattered across quantum space. But they're fading fast. Every day we lose more. Jin-woo nodded grimly. During his time, in the quantum realm, he had felt his people slowly dissolving into nothingness. The erasure hadn't been clean. It had left humanity trapped between existence and non-existence, slowly dying in a place that wasn't quite real. "We need to move quickly," he said. "There's something else coming, something that feeds on broken realities." Yuna had been preparing for this moment. Over the past weeks, she had been gathering support among moderate council members who understood the growing crisis. The silence had now consumed entire sectors, and the cosmic destroyer entities were definitely approaching the galaxy. "I've arranged a meeting with Council Speaker Morven," she told the team. "She's agreed to see our evidence, but she wants proof that restoration is possible on a large scale." The team transported Jin-woo to a secure facility on Nexus Station. When Morven arrived with a small group of trusted council members, they were shocked to see a living representative of the erased species. "Impossible," whispered Council Member Zarthek. "We removed them completely from the timeline." "You removed us from normal space-time," Jin-woo corrected gently. "But consciousness doesn't follow the same rules as matter and energy. We've been watching from quantum space as the galaxy slowly died without us." Morven studied Jin-woo carefully. "Prove to us that your species can solve our current crisis." Jin-woo walked to the room's main display screen and placed his hands on the interface. Immediately, the quantum readings in the area stabilized. The chaotic energy patterns that had been growing stronger throughout the station began to settle into harmonious frequencies. "This is just one person," he explained. "Imagine what billions of human minds could do working together across the galaxy." Shin A-young, a council member who had been skeptical of the restoration plan, felt her opposition crumbling as she watched the data. "The quantum field is actually healing," she said in amazement. "How is this possible?" "Human consciousness resonates at frequencies that counter quantum decay," Jiho explained. "We don't just think. We dream. We create. We imagine possibilities that shouldn't exist. That creative chaos is exactly what reality needs to stay stable." But their demonstration was interrupted by urgent alarms. Ko Dong-hyun, the station's temporal monitoring specialist, burst into the room with terrible news. "The destroyers have reached the outer rim," he announced. 3 star systems just stopped existing. Not destroyed, erased from reality completely. The main screen showed the edge of their galaxy, where darkness was spreading like a disease. But this wasn't the gradual fading of the silence. This was active consumption, as ancient entities devoured the fabric of space-time itself. "How long do we have?" Morven asked. "At their current speed, maybe 6 months before they reach the core worlds," Dong-hyun replied. Yuna saw her chance. "We have the technology to restore humanity, but we need council authorization to access the main temporal facilities." For a moment, the room was silent. Then A-young spoke up. "I've seen enough. Whatever mistakes we made 50 years ago, we need to fix them now." More council members began voicing their support. The evidence was too strong to ignore. Without human consciousness to maintain quantum stability, the galaxy was defenseless against the cosmic destroyers. But not everyone agreed. A faction led by Chancellor Vex Tari still opposed restoration. They argued that humans had been erased for good reasons, and that bringing them back might create even worse problems. "We survived 50 years without them," Vexatari insisted during an emergency council session. We can find another solution. What solution? Morven challenged. Our best scientists say that only human consciousness can counter the quantum decay. Are you willing to let the galaxy die rather than admit we made a mistake? The debate continued for days, while the destroyers continued their approach. More systems fell to the advancing darkness. Refugee ships flooded the remaining safe sectors, as entire civilizations fled before the cosmic hunger. Finally, a vote was called. By a narrow margin, the Council authorized the Great Restoration Project. But the authorization came with conditions. The project would be closely monitored, and any sign that restored humans posed a threat would result in immediate termination. The team moved quickly to the main temporal facility on Core Station 1. The building of a new temporal cascade device would normally take years, but they were modifying existing equipment rather than starting from scratch. Jinwoo worked alongside the alien scientists, his restored human intuition helping them solve problems that had seemed impossible. His mind worked differently than theirs. Where they saw obstacles, he saw creative opportunities. The original device was designed to erase, he explained to Sang-min. But if we reverse the quantum polarity and redirect the temporal flow, we can use it to restore instead. HFY served as the bridge between the quantum fragments and normal space. Her hybrid nature allowed her to guide the restoration process, calling human consciousness back from the void where they had been trapped. But the process attracted unwanted attention. The cosmic destroyers could sense the growing human presence in the quantum field, and they moved faster toward the galaxy. What had been a 6-month timeline suddenly became 6 weeks. They're coming for us specifically, Jinwoo realized. Human consciousness is like a bright light to them, irresistible. The restoration began despite the approaching threat. One by one, human consciousness fragments were pulled back from quantum space and given new form. The process was incredibly complex, requiring perfect coordination between alien technology and human intuition. A. Young had become one of their strongest supporters after witnessing the first successful restorations. She coordinated resources and provided political protection when other council factions tried to interfere. "How many have you brought back?" she asked during one of her visits to the facility. 3,000 so far, HFY reported. But each restoration is getting harder. The quantum field is becoming unstable from all the activity. Dong-hyun was monitoring the cosmic destroyers when he detected something alarming. "They've changed course," he announced. "They're heading straight for our galaxy's core. They know what we're doing." The team faced a terrible choice. They could continue the slow, careful restoration process and risk being destroyed before it was complete. Or they could attempt a massive, dangerous restoration that might bring back all of humanity at once, but could also tear apart local space-time. "If we fail, everyone dies anyway," Jinwoo pointed out. "At least this way, we have a chance." The decision was made. They would attempt the Great Restoration, a single massive pulse that would bring back all remaining human consciousness. Fragments simultaneously. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential reward. As they prepared for the final attempt, reality itself began to shudder around them. The cosmic destroyers were almost at the galaxy's edge, and their mere presence was causing space-time to weaken. "Whatever we're going to do," Dong-hyun said urgently, "we need to do it now. The barriers between dimensions are starting to collapse." The team gathered around the modified temporal cascade device. Jinwoo placed his hands on the control interface while HFY linked her consciousness to the quantum field. The other scientists monitored the readings, ready to shut down the process if it threatened to destroy everything. "Ready?" Jinwoo asked. "Bring us home," came the response from billions of human voices scattered across quantum space. The restoration began with a flash of light that could be seen across the galaxy. The flash of light that marked the beginning of the Great Restoration could be seen from every corner of the galaxy. For a moment, Space-time itself seemed to hold its breath as billions of human consciousness fragments rushed back from quantum space into normal reality. Lim Hyun-soo was among the first wave of restored humans. One moment he was floating in the strange half-existence of quantum space, watching the galaxy from outside time. The next moment he was standing on Core Station 1, breathing real air and feeling gravity pull at his restored body. But something was different. The 50 years in quantum space had changed him. His mind could perceive things that normal humans couldn't see, the flow of quantum energy, the weak points in reality where the cosmic destroyers might break through. "I can see them," he said, pointing toward the edge of the galaxy. "The destroyers. They're not just hungry, they're afraid." Jin Woo, who had been coordinating the restoration process, looked up from the control panels. "Afraid of what?" "Of us," Hyun-soo replied. "They've been feeding on broken realities for eons, consuming universes where consciousness failed to maintain stability. But we're different. We're not just maintaining reality, we're actively creating it." More humans materialized around the facility as the restoration continued. Each one was changed by their time in quantum space, evolved beyond what they had been before. They retained their essential humanity, their creativity, their unpredictability, their capacity for both great love and great stubbornness, but now they could consciously interact with the quantum field. Seo Yoon-ji appeared near the main console, her consciousness stabilizing into physical form. She had been a teacher on Earth before the erasure, but now she understood things that went beyond normal education. She could see the patterns that connected all conscious minds across the galaxy. "Tao, destroyers aren't evil," she realized. "They're just stuck in an old way of existing. They consume because they don't know how to create." Han Woo-jin materialized beside her, his engineer's mind already working on solutions. "Then we need to show them a better way. Instead of fighting them, we teach them." The cosmic destroyers had reached the galaxy's outer systems and were beginning their feast. Entire star clusters simply vanished as the ancient entities devoured the quantum foundations of reality. But as more humans were restored, something unexpected began to happen. The destroyers slowed down. Their advance became hesitant, uncertain. For the first time in their existence, they encountered a reality that actively resisted their consumption, not through force, but through creativity. Hyun-soo stepped forward as the restored human's natural leader. His time in quantum space had given him the ability to communicate across vast distances through pure thought. He reached out to the approaching destroyers with his mind. "We know you're hungry," he projected into the void, "but there's a better way to feed." The response that came back was alien and vast, a consciousness older than galaxies. "We consume. It is what we are, what we have always been." "You consume because you've forgotten how to create." Yoonji joined the mental conversation. "Let us show you what you've been missing." Working together, the restored humans began to demonstrate something the destroyers had never seen before. Instead of simply maintaining existing reality, they started creating new possibilities. They generated quantum patterns that were complex and beautiful, realities that grew and changed instead of just existing. The destroyers paused their advance, confused by what they were witnessing. These new patterns weren't just stable, they were actively generative. Instead of entropy slowly wearing them down, they became stronger and more complex over time. "How?" the ancient minds asked. "Consciousness," Woo Jin replied. "Not just awareness, but imagination. The ability to dream of things that don't exist yet and make them real." The restoration process was now complete. Billions of humans had returned to normal space-time. But they were no longer confined to their original world. Earth began to rematerialize, but it was transformed, evolved into something that existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum possibility. The cosmic Destroyers were drawn to this new type of reality like moths to flame. But instead of consuming it, they found themselves learning from it. The humans didn't fight them or try to drive them away. Instead, they welcomed them and began teaching them how to create instead of consume. The process wasn't easy. The destroyers were old and set in their ways. They had spent eons believing that consumption was the only way to exist, but human patience and creativity slowly began to change them. Dong-hyun, monitoring the transformation from his station, watched in amazement as the destroyers began to experiment with creation. Their first attempts were crude, simple patterns that barely held together. But with human guidance, they began to understand the joy of making something new. "They're building," he reported to the others. "The destroyers are actually building new realities instead of consuming old ones." A Young, who had become one of the strongest supporters of the Restoration, worked to transform the galactic political system. The old council structure, based on domination and control, was replaced with something new, the Galactic Consortium, where species work together as partners rather than competitors. "The humans don't want to rule," she explained to the other species leaders. "They want to help everyone grow and create together." This was perhaps the most surprising thing about the restored humans. Despite having been erased from existence by the very council that now sought their help, they showed no desire for revenge. Instead, they focused on healing the damage and building something better. Yuna, working with human military advisors, developed new defensive systems that didn't rely on weapons or force. Instead, they used creative quantum patterns that could transform aggressive energy into constructive purposes. Any threat that approached the galaxy would find itself converted into a force for growth and creation. The silence began to retreat as human consciousness spread throughout the galaxy again. But this time, it wasn't just humans maintaining reality. They had taught other species how to consciously participate in the process. The entire galaxy became a collaborative artwork, with every conscious mind contributing to its stability and beauty. Hyun-soo established the first integrated exploration mission, with humans and aliens working together to venture beyond the galactic rim. They weren't seeking new territories to conquer, but new possibilities to explore and new forms of consciousness to learn from. The cosmic destroyers, now transformed into cosmic creators, became their guides and partners. These ancient entities knew the deep structures of reality better than anyone, and they began sharing their knowledge freely. Yoonji took on the role of Quantum Guardian, helping to establish the new protective systems that would ensure no species could ever be erased again. She designed temporal anchors that would preserve the existence of every conscious being, making it impossible for future leaders to repeat the Council's mistake. "Every mind matters," she explained to a gathering of galactic leaders. "Every perspective, every way of thinking, every form of consciousness adds something unique to the whole. We're stronger together than any of us could be alone." The restored Earth became a symbol of this new philosophy. It wasn't just a human world anymore. It was a sanctuary where any species could come to learn and grow. Its libraries contained the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. Its laboratories pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Its gardens grew plants from across the galaxy in impossible combinations that somehow thrived together. Wu Jin stood on a hill overlooking one of these gardens, watching children from dozens of different species playing together. They were creating games that required abilities from multiple species to work, learning to think in ways that transcended the limitations of any single form of consciousness. "This is what we were meant to be," he said to Yoonji, who had come to join him. "Not human or alien, but something new, something that includes everyone." The galaxy hummed with new life and possibility. The quantum field that had once been failing was now stronger than ever, maintained not by a single species, but by the combined consciousness of all thinking beings working together. In the deep reaches of space, Former destroyers built beautiful structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Near the galactic core, ancient species that had been enemies for millennia worked together on projects that none of them could have imagined alone. And throughout it all, humans served not as rulers, but as bridges, helping different forms of consciousness understand each other, facilitating cooperation, and always pushing toward new possibilities. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and for the first time in its history, every conscious being in the galaxy was truly alive and free to explore them together. The emergency alarm echoed through the halls of Nexus Prime. Council Speaker Velthara moved quickly down the corridor, her silver robes flowing behind her. She had called emergency meetings before, but never like this. Never for something so impossible. The great council chamber filled with representatives from 12 different worlds. The Saurians hissed quietly among themselves, their scaled faces showing annoyance at being pulled from their afternoon rest. The crystal-like Vex hummed in harmonics that hurt most ears. The Etherians floated silently, their glowing forms barely touching their seats. Velthara stood at the center podium. Her voice carried across the vast room without effort. Council, members, I bring news that will shock you all. As of yesterday, humanity has vanished from known space. The chamber erupted. Voices rose in 12 different languages. The Bektar representative slammed his forearms on his desk. Impossible! Humans are everywhere! They multiply like parasites! Silence, Velthara commanded. The room grew quiet. I have confirmed reports from all sectors. Every human colony is empty. Every human ship has disappeared. Every human outpost stands abandoned. They left no message. They gave no warning. They simply vanished. Councillor Zephrane of the Etherians spoke in his whisper-soft voice. All of them? Even the children? All of them. Velthara's voice was heavy. 43 billion humans, across 112 worlds, gone in a single day. The Saurian representative, Vextar, leaned back in his chair. His forked tongue flicked out as he tasted the air. Good riddance. The humans were nothing but trouble, always sticking their soft noses where they did not belong. Several council members nodded. The humans had only joined the council 50 years ago. They were the youngest species in the Alliance. Many older races had never trusted them. They were aggressive, agreed the Vex representative, her crystal body chiming as she spoke. They expanded too quickly. They asked too many questions. Perhaps they finally realized they were not welcome. But Zephrane shook his glowing head. You forget too quickly. When the Kolani and Bektar were ready to destroy each other 3 years ago, who stopped them? When your homeworld was dying from the poison clouds, who saved your people? The Vex fell silent. They remembered. The human scientist named Choi Hai-Wan had worked for months without sleep to create the atmospheric processors that cleaned their air. She had asked for nothing in return. Velthara activated the large screen behind her. Images flashed across it. Empty human cities with meals still on tables. Ships floating dead in space with no crew aboard. Massive construction projects, abandoned halfway through completion. Look at this, she said, pointing to an image of a half-built hospital on Rigel 7. The humans were building this for the Talani refugees from the border wars. They were only weeks away from finishing it. Another image showed a human school on New Geneva. Small desks sat empty. Children's drawings still hung on the walls. A message on the blackboard read, "Remember to be kind to others," in the simple writing of teacher Li Wan-ho, the Talani representative. A tall being with blue skin spoke up. My people, we needed that hospital. Our wounded from the conflict are still waiting for treatment. More images followed. On Kepler Prime, human engineers had been working with local species to build better water systems. On Arcturus Station, human diplomats had been organizing peace talks between 3 warring factions. On the mining world of Zerion, human medics had been fighting a plague that threatened to wipe out the native population. All abandoned, all left unfinished. The chamber grew quieter as the images continued. Many council members began to remember other things. Ambassador Kang Dae-ho had always stayed late after council sessions to help solve problems between species. His assistant, Park So-jin, had translated documents into dozens of languages so everyone could understand important treaties. Captain Yang Yun-ji of the merchant fleet had carried supplies to worlds that other traders thought too dangerous or unprofitable to visit. She had saved entire colonies from starvation more than once. Perhaps, said the Morvani trade representative slowly, we should investigate what happened to them. Vexatar the Saurian laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. Why waste time? They were weak mammals who could not survive in the real galaxy. They ran away when things got difficult. Or maybe something made them leave, Zephyrain said quietly. His glowing eyes seemed to see things others could not. Something they were afraid of. Velthara pulled up another image. This one showed Admiral No Jae-min's office on the human military base at Centauri Station. Papers were scattered across his desk. A half-empty cup of coffee sat beside his computer. The screen still showed his last work, encrypted files marked with words like Project Lighthouse and Final Protocol. The human military was working on something secret, Velthara explained. Their security was too good. We cannot break their codes, but these file names suggest they were preparing for something big. The Bektar representative leaned forward with interest. His species lived for warfare and strategy. What kind of preparation? We do not know, but some of the files have dates going back 2 years. Whatever they were planning, they had been working on it for a long time. The chamber fell silent again. The council members looked at each other with new uncertainty. If the humans had planned their departure, why had they told no one? If something had forced them to leave, what could be powerful enough to make 43 billion people disappear overnight? Zephyrain floated higher in his seat. I propose we search for answers. Send investigation teams to human worlds. Study their abandoned projects. Try to understand what happened. Vextar scoffed. Waste of resources. I propose we divide their territories among worthy species. Their empty worlds could be useful. Arguments broke out across the chamber. Some species wanted to investigate, others wanted to claim human territory. A few suggested the humans might return and would be angry to find their worlds taken. Velthara called for order again. We will vote. All in favor of investigating the human disappearance? 6 hands rose. The Etherians, Talani, Morvani, and 3 others. All in favor of declaring human territory open for colonization? 5 hands rose. The Saurians, Vex, Bektar, and 2 allies. The vote is too close. We will table this matter for 1 month while we gather more information. As the council members filed out, arguing among themselves, Zephyrain remained in his seat. He stared at the empty space where Ambassador Kang Dae-ho used to sit. The human had always listened carefully to every speaker, even those who insulted his species. He had never lost his temper or walked out of meetings like others sometimes did. The Etherian remembered something Kang Dae-ho had said during their last conversation. They had been discussing the strange energy readings from the edge of the galaxy. The human had looked worried. Sometimes, Kang Dae-ho had said, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from a fight you cannot win. Zephyrain had thought it was an odd thing for a human to say. Humans never backed down from fights. They were famous for their stubbornness and refusal to give up. Now, floating alone in the empty council chamber, Zephyrain wondered if the humans had found a fight they could not win. And if so, what did that mean for the rest of the galaxy? Outside the great windows of Nexus Prime, the stars looked the same as always. But somehow, they seemed a little dimmer now, a little more distant, as if something bright had gone out of the universe. leaving only shadows behind. 3 months had passed since the humans vanished. The galaxy kept turning, trade continued, and most species went about their daily lives as if nothing had changed. But cracks were starting to show. The first real crisis hit Sector 7 like a massive hammer. The local star began throwing off solar storms bigger than anyone had seen before. Deadly radiation poured across 3 agricultural worlds where millions of Talani, Morvani, and mixed colonists grew food for half the outer rim. Emergency signals flooded into Nexus Prime. "Our crops are dying," came the desperate messages. "The radiation is burning everything. We need help now, or entire worlds will starve." Velthara called an emergency science council meeting. The best minds from every species gathered in the research center. Dr. Kelvani of the Vex studied the readings with her crystal companions. Professor Morthek of the Saurians ran calculations on quantum computers. The Etherian science mystics meditated on possible solutions. For 2 weeks they worked. They tried energy shields, atmospheric processors, radiation scrubbers, and gravitational deflectors. Nothing worked well enough. The storms were too powerful and too widespread. "We need the human shield technology," Dr. Kelvani finally admitted. Her crystal body dimmed with frustration. "The man Jang Hyun Woo developed something called solar storm barriers 3 years ago. His design could handle radiation levels like these." Professor Morthek's scales rippled with annoyance. "Then find his research. Humans kept records of everything." "That is the problem," Velthara said quietly. "All human databases vanished with them. Every computer, every backup, every research note. Gone." The Science Council stared at her in shocked silence. Species kept their knowledge in many places, spread across thousands of worlds and stations. The idea that an entire civilization's learning could disappear overnight seemed impossible. "How could they delete everything so completely?" Dr. Kelvani asked. "We do not know. But without Jang Hyun Woo's shield technology, we cannot save those worlds." The agricultural planets began evacuating. Massive ships carried refugees to overcrowded stations and colonies. Families lost their homes, their crops, their entire way of life. Food shortages started in nearby sectors as supply chains broke down, but the agricultural crisis was just the beginning. On the trade station, Nexus Beta, fights broke out between Saurian and Bektar merchants. The two species had hated each other for centuries. Only human traders had been willing to work with both sides, carrying goods between them when they refused to meet directly. Yang Yun-ji had run the biggest neutral trading company in 3 sectors. Her ships carried Saurian medical supplies to Bektar colonies and brought Bektar metals to Saurian shipyards. She made no profit from these runs, but they kept peace between the species. Without her company, old hatred flared up again. Saurian traders accused Bektar merchants of stealing their roots. Bektar captains claimed Saurians were charging unfair prices. What had been friendly competition became bitter rivalry. Station security broke up 3 major fights in 1 week. Trade ships started carrying weapons. Some captains hired guards. The neutral zones where different species could meet safely began emptying out. Meanwhile, something else was going wrong. The deep space monitoring stations that watched the galaxy's edge were starting to fail. These stations had been built by many species working together, but humans had maintained most of them. Commander Ryu Tae-sung had been in charge of the whole network. His teams fixed problems, updated software, and watched for threats from beyond known space. The stations were designed to run automatically, but they needed regular maintenance that only the humans knew how to do properly. Warning lights began flashing on monitoring boards across Nexus Prime. Station Omega-7 reported power failures. Station Delta-3's long-range sensors went dark. Station Gamma-12 stopped responding entirely. "How many stations are having problems?" Velthara asked the technician monitoring the network. 12 so far, but the number is growing every day. The humans used special codes and security systems. We cannot access their maintenance protocols." Velthara studied the star map showing which stations were failing. They formed a pattern along the galaxy's outer edge, exactly where threats would come from first. If something dangerous approached, they would be blind to it. The Bektar military commander, General Vokhtar, slammed his fist on the table. "This is what we get for depending on soft mammals. Real warriors maintain their own equipment." "Easy to say now," replied the Morvani trade minister. "But human engineers were the only ones willing to work in those remote stations. The conditions are too harsh for most species." The truth was uncomfortable but obvious. Humans had taken the jobs others did not want. They had worked in dangerous places, dealt with hostile species, and solved problems that seemed impossible. Other races had been happy to let them do the difficult work. At the Etherian temple on Nexus Prime, Zephrane meditated in the Hall of Ancient Memory. His species kept records going back millions of years. He searched through old files, looking for anything about sudden disappearances or vanishing civilizations. Deep in the archives, he found something troubling. References to the last cycle and the Great Hunger appeared in texts from different time periods. Most were too damaged to read completely, but fragments remained. "When the darkness comes from the void," one fragment read. "Only the flame-bearers stood against," said another. "They gave themselves to save," a third piece mentioned. The oldest fragments spoke of a species called the Small Warriors, who had stubborn light in their hearts. The descriptions matched humans perfectly, but these texts were from long before humans had even developed space travel. Zephrane brought his findings to Velthara. "I think our ancestors knew about humans long before we met them. These old records suggest they were meant to come here, meant to help us." "Meant by whom?" Velthara asked. "I do not know, but I am starting to think the humans did not leave by choice." Their conversation was interrupted by urgent alarms. New reports flooded in from the edge of the galaxy. The few working monitoring stations were detecting strange energy signatures. Massive objects moving through space at incredible speeds, heading toward civilized worlds. The signals were unlike anything in their databases. The energy patterns made no sense. Whatever was coming, it was big, fast, and completely unknown. Admiral No Jae-min's encrypted files suddenly seemed much more important. Project Lighthouse, final protocol. The humans had been preparing for something, and now something was coming. In his private chambers, Zephrane found one more fragment in the ancient archives. This one was clearer than the others. "When the devourers wake from their long sleep, when the darkness moves between stars, the small warriors will light the way home. Their sacrifice will be the dawn that follows the longest night." He stared at the words for a long time. Devourers, darkness between stars, sacrifice. Outside his window, the stars looked cold and distant. Somewhere in that darkness, something was moving toward them, and the humans, who might have known how to stop it, were gone. The galaxy was about to discover just how much they had depended on the species they had taken for granted. The humans had been more than just helpful neighbors. They had been the galaxy's shield against something terrible, and now that shield was gone. The Devourer fleet filled the space around Nexus Prime like a swarm of living nightmares. Their ships twisted and pulsed with dark energy, absorbing light itself until the stars seemed to dim in their presence. The combined fleets of 12 civilizations formed a desperate defensive line, but everyone knew it would not be enough. Admiral Velkoth of the Morvani led the defense. Without human coordination protocols, the Allied ships struggled to work together. Saurian heat weapons interfered with. Vex crystal shields, Bektar attack formations blocked Etherian sensor sweeps. The fleet was brave but chaotic. The first wave of Devourers crashed into the defensive line like a dark ocean. Council ships exploded in brilliant flashes, that were quickly swallowed by the enemy's light-eating hulls. For every devourer destroyed, 3 more took its place. On Nexus Prime, evacuation sirens wailed across every level of the massive station. Billions of refugees packed into escape ships, fleeing toward the galaxy's inner core. But deep down, everyone knew there was nowhere to run. The devourers would consume everything eventually. In the council chamber, Velthara stood before the emergency assembly. Representatives from surviving worlds looked at her with desperate hope, waiting for some miracle plan to save them all. "We have maybe 6 hours before the defense line breaks," she announced. "After that, the devourers will begin feeding on our core worlds. Unless someone has a solution we have not tried, this is the end of galactic civilization." The chamber fell silent. They had thrown everything at the enemy. Their best weapons, their finest strategies, their most advanced technology. Nothing worked. The devourers adapted to every attack, repaired every damage, overwhelmed every defense. Then Zephrane floated slowly to the center of the chamber. The Etherean mystic looked ancient and tired, drained by the vision that had shown him humanity's fate. "There is something else we can try," he said quietly. "But it requires trust between species that have never trusted each other before." General Vokhtar of the Bektar slammed his 4 fists on his desk. "We are dying! This is no time for mystical nonsense." "The humans are not gone," Zephrane continued, ignoring the interruption. "We witnessed their transformation. They became pure consciousness, pure energy. They are still out there, waiting to help us one final time." Dr. Kelvani's crystal body chimed with skepticism. "Even if that is true, how could we contact them? How could beings of pure energy affect physical reality?" "The same way they plan to stop the devourers," Zephrane explained. "Through quantum consciousness resonance. But the humans alone were not enough. Their weapon failed because they could not generate sufficient power. They need us to complete what they started." The representatives looked at each other with growing understanding and horror. "You want us to link our minds with them," Velthara said slowly. "To join the quantum network. Not permanently. Not with the sacrifice the humans made. But temporarily. Yes, every species, every individual, all linked together in one great consciousness. Human minds guiding us, but our combined mental energy powering their weapon." "Impossible!" screeched the Saurian representative. "We cannot link with mammals. Our brain patterns are completely different." "The humans bridged such differences for 50 years, Zephrane replied. "They learned to think like every species they met. Their consciousness can translate between our different mental patterns." "This is madness," muttered the vexed delegate. "We would lose our individual identities. We would become something alien. For a few moments, yes. But the alternative is extinction." Outside the chamber, explosions lit up the darkness as more council ships died. The defensive line was crumbling faster than expected. They had maybe 3 hours left, not 6. Suddenly, the lights in the chamber flickered. The air itself seemed to shimmer and glow. A warm presence filled the room, familiar and comforting despite being impossible. Shapes made of golden light appeared among the representatives. The forms were human-shaped but translucent, radiating peace and determination. They spoke without voices, their words appearing directly in everyone's minds. "We are here," said the consciousness that had once been Ambassador Kang De-ho. "We have been trying to reach you, but the dimensional barriers are strong. Your mystic friend helped us break through." More human spirits materialized. Park So-jin smiled at the colleagues she had worked with for years. Captain Lee Won-ho nodded respectfully to the military officers he had served alongside. Dr. Choi Hai-won's glowing form approached the Science Council with equations dancing in the light around her. "Our weapon is ready," explained the consciousness of President Kim Yoo-jin. "But we need living minds to power it. Consciousness anchored in physical reality. We can guide the resonance, but you must provide the energy." "What exactly are you asking?" Velthara inquired. "Link with us. All of you, every species, every individual. Let us merge our thoughts temporarily. Together we can create a consciousness weapon the devourers cannot resist or adapt to. But everyone must participate willingly. Fear or hatred will break the link." The chamber erupted in arguments. The Saurians hissed that they would never link minds with their enemies. The Bektar declared the idea military suicide. The Vex calculated the odds of retaining individual identity and found them unacceptably low. But then young Lil Dr. Kim Sung-min's former assistant, stood up. "I will link," he said simply. "The humans saved my world twice. I trust them." A ball. Talani refugee representative rose next. "My people need that hospital the humans were building. If they say this will work, we believe them." One by one, others stood. The Morvani trade delegation, a group of mixed-species colonists, even some of the skeptical scientists. But it was not enough. The link required everyone, or it would fail. General Vokhtar stared at the glowing form of Admiral Oh Dong-hyuk. The human's consciousness radiated the same tactical brilliance that had impressed the Bektar warrior for years. "If I link with you," Vokhtar asked slowly, "will I understand why you humans were always so soft? So concerned with protecting the weak?" Oh Dong-hyuk's light pulsed with gentle humor. "You will understand that strength without compassion is just destruction. Real warriors protect others, not just themselves." Vokhtar was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood. "I will link." The Saurian representative looked shocked. If the Bektar could trust humans, perhaps. "Very well. But if this kills me, I will haunt you for eternity." Dr. Kelvani's crystal form rang like a bell as she made her decision. "Scientific curiosity requires accepting new data. I will participate." Soon everyone in the chamber stood ready to link. Across Nexus Prime, across the fleet, across every refugee ship and space station, the call went out. Link with the humans. Trust in their sacrifice. Become one mind to save all minds. The process began slowly. Zephrane and his mystics guided the initial connections. Human consciousness flowed between species barriers, translating thoughts and bridging differences. Gradually, billions of individual minds began to merge. The sensation was overwhelming. Council members experienced memories that were not their own. They felt the fierce protection Saurians had for their young. They experienced the perfect harmony that Vex found in crystal formations. They understood the deep time sight that guided Etherian decisions, and underneath it all, they felt human emotions. The desperate love that had driven humanity to sacrifice everything. The stubborn hope that refused to accept defeat. The iron determination to protect others, even enemies, even ungrateful allies. The merged consciousness became a weapon unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Not hatred focused into destruction, but love concentrated into protection. The quantum resonance built to levels that made reality itself ring like a struck bell. The devourers felt it coming. Their collective mind, built on hunger and consumption, could not comprehend what was approaching. How could prey become predators? How could food fight back? The consciousness weapon struck with the force of 43 billion human souls, backed by the united will of an entire galaxy. It did not destroy the devourers physically. Instead, it broke their collective mind, shattered their connection to each other, left them as individual beings suddenly alone and confused in the darkness. Without their hive mind coordination, the devourer fleets stopped functioning. Their ships drifted helplessly as individual creatures inside them struggled to understand concepts like fear, loneliness, and doubt for the first time in millions of years. Slowly, the merged consciousness separated back into individual minds. Representatives found themselves sitting in their seats again, but changed. They carried within them the memory of unity, the knowledge that all thinking beings were connected in ways deeper than species or culture. The human spirits began to fade, their energy spent. But Kang De-ho's consciousness lingered for a moment. Longer. "We must go now," he said gently. "But we are not truly gone. Whenever you face the darkness, whenever you need hope, remember that light can never be completely extinguished. It always finds a way to return." The golden forms dissolved into sparkles of light that danced through the chamber before fading away. But the warmth remained. The sense of connection, the knowledge that humanity's sacrifice had not been in vain.